Please welcome Stack Overflow CEO Prashanth Chandrasekar.
I can make your hands clap. Said I can make your hands clap.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for having me here in Salt Lake City. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Prashanth Chandrasekar. I'm the CEO of Stack Overflow. I'm here to talk to you about developers and what they can signal about the future of technology. So for those of you that do not know Stack Overflow, we're the world's largest software developer community and platform. I would encourage you to talk to technologists within your organization if you're not aware of us, because it's very likely that they've used us over the past decade or so. So just to give you a sense of scale about who we are. So we are a company that serves close to 100 million monthly visitors from all around the world. It makes us one of the world's most popular websites. We have one of the largest knowledge bases of technology knowledge, which includes everything from cloud technologies like AWS and Azure and Google Cloud and Python and JavaScript and so on, to effectively even newer topics like blockchain, as an example. And all of this information accumulates to about 50 million questions and answers on our public platform. And the number of people that come to our website on a weekly basis is quite staggering, right? So if you think about 81% of the world's software developers and technologists visit our websites literally on a weekly basis to get answers to their questions when they're sort of in the moment of having an issue. And all of this content since 2008 has been accessed collectively about 50 billion times on our website. So that gives you a sense of who we are. Our community, by the way, is completely global. We are in pretty much every country that you can imagine, 239, including territories, et cetera. But it's been fascinating for us to serve a very, very diverse population of folks with very different backgrounds, but all unified with this mission of building great technology applications. In addition to what I just described, which is the public platform that's been around since 2008, that, by the way, is not only Stack Overflow, but Stack Exchange websites that include topics like DevOps and machine learning and all these other topics that have all this content and knowledge. We have various paid products that allow companies and developers and technologists to truly engage together and to solve the biggest challenges that they're encountering, both in the context of what they need to do within their companies, as well as reskilling in terms of their workforces. So the first one is all about a series of advertising products. So many of you are actually customers of ours, where you promote yourselves as your products are promoted. You're able to build your sub-communities on top of Stack Overflow through what we call collectives on Stack Overflow. We also have the ability for companies to promote themselves as great employers on Stack Overflow to attract the developers and technologists to come work for them. We also have all the sort of the traditional advertising products with our podcast that goes out to millions of people and so on and so forth. But the primary business that we have is our SaaS private enterprise version of Stack Overflow that companies use inside their organizations to share knowledge, break down silos, and really to be able to get developers and technologists to be onboarded really rapidly and for them to get upskilled very, very quickly so they can actually go and do productive things in their companies. So this has been around for several years, since 2017, and we have over 15,000 organizations on the SaaS platform. And we have companies like Microsoft with about 100,000 users on there, every financial services institution with 50, 60,000 users on the platform, all the big retailers, some of you in the room, are customers of ours, and we have a global business that's growing very rapidly. So that is our company in a quick nutshell, just to give you the context. And what I thought I would do is, I talk to CIOs, CTOs, senior vice presidents, et cetera, in technology literally on a daily basis. And we constantly ask them about the key issues that they're facing, and I thought I'd share a little bit about the key issues, plus a lot of data from Stack Overflow, given the scale that we operate at. So a lot of what I'll show you in the next few slides come from our developer survey that goes out to the millions of software developers on a yearly basis. Many of your people have likely answered these surveys. We get typically about 100,000 responses a year. So this is an at-scale survey, and it's somewhat very meaningful in terms of the learnings. So the three issues that we encounter when we talk to CTOs and CIOs, that they're all having hiring onboarding, reskilling, and retention issues. Irrespective of the market environment, which we're obviously in a fairly volatile environment at the moment, irrespective of that, there's a huge supply-demand imbalance, as we've known, and that is a big issue. That's number one. Number two is executing these big transformations, as already been talked about today. And these are cloud transformations, moving from your data center to the cloud. It's unlocking the value of your data within your company through machine learning. It's DevOps and agile transformation. It's improving the security posture of your company. There are all these transformations. It doesn't matter if you're an incumbent company or a disruptor of an incumbent company. You've all got these challenges that you're trying to drive. And then finally, it's this issue of grappling with a distributed workforce. And I think most technology leaders, irrespective of where they have initially landed on this topic, whether they should really sort of focus on bringing people to the office or hybrid, et cetera, this is something that people we see struggle with all the time. And they've really, especially when it's coupled with the first issue around hiring and retention. So these three issues, what I thought I'd do is go deeper into these with some data. So let's get into it. So hiring and retention, firstly. Here's some data that I thought was sort of fairly interesting. So firstly, the aspects that make people want to stay in companies and potentially leave to go to other companies are quite interesting. So number one, it's all about flexibility. So over 60% of people that we surveyed, again, remember I said that we're getting responses from about 100,000 people. 60% of them said if we didn't actually enable a flexible work environment, how they worked, when they worked, where they worked, they were just not going to be happy. And so that is very important, I think, especially when you think about the challenging technology hiring environment. Number two, productivity was also a huge, huge part of this. This includes how you get onboarded as a new developer, as a technologist. Are you getting interrupted at work constantly by folks about the same topic over and over again? As a new person, do you have access to all the right information at the right time to sort of really get unstuck? All of that contributes to work. About 50% of the people that responded said that. And as part of productivity, the technology stack was very, very important. So, this is quite fascinating that people, when they found out about the technology stacks within companies, many of them actually decided to exit the interview process. And so this includes things like, what cloud technologies are you using? It includes what productivity software are you using? Are they actually going to be efficient in their job, or is this going to be a total mess when they enter? And this is quite fascinating to us, that a good chunk of them decided that they were planning on leaving just the interview process. And the topic that's sort of obviously very relevant to today's conference, which is all about opportunities to learn. 50% of the folks that we talked to said that they really appreciated having opportunities to learn in their companies. And this is an important concept. Many companies have done this for many years. But even at Stack Overflow, we carve out something called Learn, Share, and Grow Days, specifically dedicated once a month just for people to learn, specifically technologists. And that is a huge boost to engagement, to productivity, to enabling people to carve out the time to actually think strategically, work on, just step away from their daily jobs to actually get really productive as a result. And why is this important? Because if you think, let's get sort of deeper into why learning is so important. Because our survey suggests that this past year, 70% of developers and technologists are learning to code online, right? And that is, by the way, up 10 percentage points in 1 year. It was about 60% a year ago. So what does that mean? That means that technology is moving quite rapidly. This is how people are getting access to information, and they're learning sort of in the moment. And this is especially true when you look at next generation of technologists. We're talking about the younger generation, folks who are getting into writing code. And if you look at this again from our survey, the ways in which people are learning is everything from technical documentation that's online, which is obvious because people go to the root of where they're actually going to go learn. And they obviously leverage Stack Overflow, which is one of the default ways in which they learn in the moment when they're stuck. So it's sort of just-in-time learning. And then they have all these other sort of areas of blogs and how-to videos and written tutorials. But you'll notice that sort of traditional forms of education, long are gone the days where you're dusting off your textbook. I still have all my Perl and Java textbooks from college in the 1990s, which are piling up. And that is not the way people learn these days because it's just moving too quickly, right? And the reason why this is so important is that there's a new technology that's being learned by developers literally on a yearly basis. 70% of the case of developers do this on a yearly basis. So with that rapid of a learning curve, and why is that important? Because we all know every year there's a flurry of new technologies, right? And we track this all the time. Last year it's Rust and there's Svelte and you name it. The transformation of software development over the past decade has been fascinating to see. There's so many inefficiencies that have been sort of removed as the open source communities build newer and newer languages that are making up for deficiencies of the past, whether that's a memory issue or elegance in how you write code and so on. And so this is the underlying reason why people are almost forced to learn. They have to learn to survive. So let's go into the second topic, which is about executing big transformations. So I thought I'd dig into sort of three different areas which I think should signal to us what is happening in technology in the future, because very much what they're learning today is going to drive what happens in companies in the future. So a lot of these trends that we notice are straight from our website. Again, 100 million users, 50 million questions and answers. So again, we see this at scale. And the first topic is, of course, cloud acceleration. So, of course, that's been around for about 10 years. I used to lead a cloud business prior to me taking on the CEO role at Stack a few years ago. And we've been doing this for a while. But the acceleration that we're seeing is quite staggering. Secondly, even a fairly religious topic like blockchain, which has got a lot of polarizing views, is also a topic that is here to stay. And I'll tell you why in a second. And then finally, machine learning democratization, which is really unlocking the value of the data within your companies to really get closer to your customers and to build products that really serve the ultimate use cases that you care about. So let's dig into each one. So in terms of cloud, the number of technology questions, cloud questions on Stack Overflow increased 50% year over year over the past 10 years on average, right? So it's been sort of somewhat exponential and it's been compounding. And if you look at what happened during the pandemic, the first 3 months effectively pushed us forward 4 years in terms of the number of questions that were asked, the number of people that were learning how to build applications on AWS, on Azure, on Google Cloud, and so on. It was absolutely explosive to see the questions really sort of questions and answers really sort of accelerate. We had really a lot of interest with developers and technologists trying to learn cross platforms. So we started noticing that people who, for example, who are learning how to code on AWS were also learning how to code on Google Cloud. Not as strong of a relationship with, let's say, Microsoft, as an example. But that linkage between AWS and Google Cloud is very apparent, as an example. And then there's so many other examples we can go into. But cloud developers, especially as we go into a multi-cloud world, and we've been doing that for many years, I think it's very clear that people are looking to learn sort of parallel topics. Topics like CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps, microservices, all these topics are huge accelerants. And you'll notice that if you're not really focused on topics like CI/CD or DevOps or continuous testing or automated testing, microservices, many of the technologists in the room know about the monolith and really sort of breaking that down. All of those topics, that's the default. People are absolutely working on these subjects within companies, and if you're not doing it, then you're behind the curve. Containerization is also a very important topic because it basically suggests that people are building cloud environments at scale within companies. And this is especially evident when you look at technologies like Docker and Kubernetes, which are obviously big orchestration engines for containers. And this is really driving large-scale innovation on the cloud within organizations. This is also true, by the way, in terms of native services around container services around AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. We see a pretty big explosion in that context as well. So containers and orchestration of it, I think, really important. And then if you go into the second subtopic, which is blockchain, again, fairly religious, but still 80% increase year over year over the past decade in terms of questions and answers, which is quite fascinating, right? And what's also sort of fascinating that it's no longer just sort of a hobby. This is actually seeping into the workplace. And if you looked at what we look in terms of our survey results, it said that approximately 31% of folks who were building blockchain applications were building it at work. And out of that 31%, 70% of that 31% were in tech companies, by the way. And you even noticed a couple of days ago, Google Cloud made that announcement with Coinbase. You might have seen that. So, irrespective of your personal beliefs on the subject, it's happening. And I think we also see this topic in terms of the building blocks of how people are writing blockchain applications. And I think one of the things that's going on is that the underlying technologies are actually quite similar, right? If you think about Python and JavaScript, et cetera, Node.js, all of these are actually still the same fundamental building blocks to build next generation of applications. So that's, I think, somewhat encouraging for folks to sort of get into this space. It's accessible. And let's talk about feelings for a second. So how do people actually feel about blockchain, right? And when we asked this question, it was somewhat interesting to see that the world is completely split on this topic. There's a good chunk that absolutely love this, a good chunk that absolutely hate it, and there's a good chunk that's sort of completely indifferent about this. And say, we'll see what happens. And I can understand that group because it's mostly about, is there a good use case? Is it solving a big enough problem? And then you really sort of go behind it, right? So there's obviously a lot of noise around the subject, but clearly people are sort of in wait-and-see mode as we make our way through the technology S-curve on the topic. All right, and then let's talk about machine learning, the third discussion. So this topic also has seen a fairly large increase in terms of the number of questions, about 50% year over year over the past several years. And technologies like TensorFlow and PyTorch, et cetera, very, very accessed on Stack Overflow. So that suggests that people are learning a lot about machine learning. And it's not only, by the way, just technologists. It's been democratized literally in all parts of the company. It's not uncommon for finance departments to care about this topic, et cetera, right? So this is becoming very much a democratized situation. And we also see some really good correlations with things like Python, which you see a fairly good correlation between machine learning and Python's growth within Stack Overflow, which also suggests that they're very much sort of interlinked and they're sort of driving each other almost as a network effect. All right, and then the final sort of third pillar is managing work in a distributed work environment. So especially for you technology leaders in the room, trying to manage these groups of people all around the world, what does that mean? How do we actually do that well? So firstly, I'm here to tell you with a lot of confidence and conviction that remote and hybrid work is the future. I just want you to sort of let that sink in for a second. If you're actually on the fence on this subject, you are fishing from a very small pool of about 15% of the population if you're going to be draconian about asking people to sort of get into the office. That's just reality. Especially in an environment where you're trying to attract a lot of people to your companies, it's important for you to consider. And by the way, that's easier said than done. Let's assume that hybrid work is in fact the future. I can tell you that it's also a very messy proposition. I think as it's evidenced over the past several years, the issues that it actually generates with burnout, the constant communication through chat ops, the constant pings on the shoulder for information, the same questions and answers. And of course, we know a little bit about this at Stack Overflow with our enterprise product, which is Stack Overflow for Teams, where we enable this to be minimized through sort of knowledge sharing. And this is very much a key issue within companies. So ultimately, when you think about what developers want in a distributed work environment, 56% of them said they just wouldn't want to work for companies that force them to work certain working hours. So, we're all, for the technologists in the room, we've all been there debugging code at 3 o'clock in the morning, as I remember, and that's just when things happen, sometimes. And this is not an 8 to 4, 8 to 5 type of proposition. Separately, people want the ability to have the flexibility to work where they want, when they want, how they want. And they also want to make sure that they're able to seek information from outside their team. Many of our customers, some of you are in the room, in our Stack Overflow for Teams product, most of their answers, 67% or so of the answers of questions within a certain department are actually answered by people outside a particular department. So how do you unlock the knowledge within your organization, the collective power of your organization to learn and to be able to move forward really, really rapidly? So all of this layers up to a very important statistic that basically is around developer experience. So 53% of the folks that we spoke to said that companies that prioritize the developer experience really were attractive companies to them. How are they onboarding? Are they productive? Is it a flexible environment? And so on. And so that's really sort of some key statistics that I thought would be useful to you. So again, to recap, the key issues are hiring, onboarding, reskilling your employees just in time, and retaining those employees. Secondly, it's about executing these big transformations around cloud, blockchain, machine learning. And thirdly, it's about managing all this in a highly distributed work environment. And all of this, when you sort of layer it up, it's all about the developer experience. And the developer experience centers around three topics. Firstly, it's about flexibility. Secondly, it's about learning. And thirdly, it's about productivity. And those three topics, if you focus on those with tools like Stack Overflow for Teams or Pluralsight's learning capability or a combination or other things, all of that makes a huge difference in things so that you can actually control, especially in this very dynamic external environment. And so in terms of hiring and retaining talent, it's all about making sure that you're empowering people to learn and collaborate cross-functionally. About driving these big transformations, we want to realize that what people are learning today, developers and technologists, is really going to signal to you what transformations are going to be driven in the future. And then finally, especially when you're talking about distributed teams, you want to make sure that you've got tremendous flexibility in the organization and opportunities to learn for folks. All right, and as we say at Stack Overflow, all learning starts with a question, and that's why we exist in many ways, and we're sort of that just-in-time learning mechanism for folks, either in our public platform with 50 million questions and answers, or on our enterprise product within organizations that people are leveraging to unlock the collective knowledge within companies to go faster. All right, with that, I'll conclude. That's my information. You can reach out to me on my email, my first name at stackoverflow.com, or on LinkedIn or Twitter. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Prashanth.
Got it. Well, good to see you.
Okay, so really appreciated hearing Prashanth's thoughts and especially seeing the data from Stack Overflow. I know for us at Pluralsight, every year we love seeing that data come out and learning about what's happening in the developer ecosystem. So we have an opportunity for the audience, for all of you, to ask some questions to Prashanth. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A here. And I believe we have mic runners in the audience. Bring the house lights up. Okay. All right, so I can't see the mic runners. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if you have a question for Prashanth, raise your hand and one of our mic runners will bring the mic out to you and we'll go from there. And maybe while we're waiting for some of you to formulate your thoughts, Prashanth, I'll ask.
Okay, there's one there, I think.
We have one? Okay.
Hi, Prashanth. Thanks for the presentation. Jay Ferguson, Head of Digital Transformation for Bank of Montreal. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the retention component tied back to the experience in the survey, which it sounds like was very comprehensive.
Yes.
So thank you for those results.
Yep.
Where did you have a really tight connection to what developers looked at from a major retention consideration? Was it the flexibility? Did you get into comp? Did you get into the actual technologies? What was the biggest tie that kind of binded them back in the data you saw?
Yeah, I think those three concepts, beyond the three concepts that I described, I think flexibility, opportunities to learn, and productivity, those were absolutely the ones that stood out very significantly as key reasons why people stayed within companies versus left, especially technologists. Of course, this is outside of sort of the broader elements of companies, including, for example, are they mission-driven? Do they care about what they're actually working on? Is this organization in alignment with their core values? Those topics obviously are like number one even beyond that. That's more general. But specifically for technologists, it came down to the developer experience. It's about those three topics, very, very specifically. And irrespective of, especially when you think about like outside of retention, when you think about people getting hired into organizations, any talent acquisition team these days is under tremendous amounts of pressure, right? Because it's very common to sort of to be unable to fill the roles that you've actually got, within your company, because you've got a lot of competition for people with, big organizations tossing a lot of big numbers at people. It's not common for candidates to have, multiple offers at offer stage, and so there's no guarantee that you actually, just because you've given somebody an offer, that you're going to be able to close the person. And also, especially in this environment, I think people are very nervous about making a job change because, the first in, first out, sort of FIFO type of approach is also, I think, very much a consideration. Will you appreciate this as the chief people officer? So I think, so all of those considerations, I know I sort of answered it more broadly, but retention, those three topics for sure, but in terms of new hires, those are the things that care.
Other questions from the audience?
One down there, I think.
Thank you. Hi, Kate Taylor from Morgan Stanley, leading tech learning and development. I'm interested in your survey results in general. Did you see differences in responses based on the years of experience of the developers? We're finding, the younger people have different desires and needs than some of the people that have been with us longer. So just curious in what you saw in your survey. Thanks.
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you. Appreciate the question. I think, yeah, definitely there are differences between the next generation of developers and technologists versus the folks who have been doing it for a long time. We're noticing sort of an earlier sort of bent in terms of, the first, the age at which people actually start writing code is going lower and becoming lower and lower, especially, by the way, in international countries, more so even than the US. I think the US has a little bit of catching up to do on that subject because technology education is a huge priority in other countries. So that we noticed that in terms of just the population has actually skewed a lot lower. The other thing that we've noticed is that there's actually quite a large increase in the younger population moving into things like freelance work, which I think is notable because I think that's given people's sort of reassessment of their purpose and sense of belonging in companies, et cetera, as part of the pandemic and sort of the realization, people are just saying, they ultimately want to contribute, but they want to contribute in very specific ways. They want flexibility. They want to prioritize other things. So the younger population seems to be also skewing in that direction, where they have multiple, interesting opportunities to work on. And also, perhaps a third other call out will be, we've noticed a fairly large increase over the past several years on people wanting to actually talk about these subjects, flexibility, productivity, et cetera. Like when I joined as a CEO 3 years ago, the survey was actually very technical. It was all about what's the most popular language, which is still the case. Like that's still the case. But we started noticing, especially the younger population, asking a lot more about. Listen, I really want to understand how my community feels about these topics, which are a lot more about the nature of work. It's about a sense of belonging. It's about diversity. It's about inclusion, it's about those topics versus purely just about the technology. So I think our scope has widened as a result of the younger population pushing us in that direction.
I think we've got time for one more question.
We got one there, I think, and the one.
Got one here. Yeah.
Hi, this is Shetal from Synopsys, Senior Director of Engineering for DevOps and Agile Transformation. So you made a big statement about 15% of your survey participants wants in person versus what I see from the companies where certain big, large organizations wants employees to come to office because they fear that innovation is lacking. What are your views and thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great to meet you, by the way. I think that's the balance that I was mentioning earlier on, where I think that it's easier said than done to say hybrid work is the future, because that does come with complications. But the thing that we have conviction around is that the train has left the station on that subject. As in, it's too hard to reel it back now, given what people have tasted around flexibility, reducing 2 hours of a commute time. Hey, I can be doubly productive by not having the stress of doing that. So I think that is sort of the message I'm trying to make sure you folks understand. And I think conversely, even in our company, we added 200 people just in the first 6 months of this year. So we're growing very rapidly because of our SaaS business. And we've noticed that to drive innovation, we have to be very deliberate about that. So as an example, we come together as a company every year, physically, in person, to kick off the fiscal year. I do, obviously, our opening sort of, here's where we're going as a company for the next year and the next 3 years, et cetera. We have training in person. There's a whole, there's a product roadmap discussion. So all of that happens in person. And then throughout the year, there are sub-teams that get together in person as well. So for example, next week, all our engineering leaders are meeting, in Atlanta, as an example, right? This week, all our sales QBRs of our enterprise sellers they're all happening in person, right, in New York. So things like that do happen, but they happen on a very specific schedule. So it's either once a quarter or even my own team, my SLT, my own direct leaders that I bring together literally on a quarterly basis to do our SLT on-site. So we do that. We're going to do that in the next couple of weeks in San Francisco, as an example, right? So all of that, I think, is sort of the way in which we're managing it. But I think it's always a blend. What I'm talking about is mostly like the daily grind, removing that daily grind. It doesn't mean that people should just not connect, because we're all human at the end of the day. We want to be able to actually build trust, which I think is a very important thing done in person versus online, and building relationships and trust. You can't replace that.
Prashanth, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It's been awesome to have you here today.
Got it.
Let's give Prashanth another round of applause.
Thank you, folks.
Your hands clap.
Thank you.